Don't tell the wrong jokes. So I'm going to be very careful only to tell jokes about Eddie and Carl. But actually, one of the most interesting things is the way that these 2 days rose to a crescendo, and the amazingly significant, important issues that were discussed, and obviously the differences of opinions in the audience, and how those differences and those tensions were handled in a very humorous way. In fact, the only way to handle them in this sort of context. And I suppose that's a feature of South Africa. In fact, I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where I would experience quite the excitement and the engagement that I experienced here these last 2 days. This is South Africa, but it also is SWAP. As I said earlier the other day, I have been watching SWAP for many years. I heard Eddie used to visit me in California when there was a boycott. Ah, Lou is here. Oh, how do you do? Lou is my first girlfriend in South Africa. She had one distinctive feature. 18, okay. One distinctive feature, she always wore green stockings. Yeah. And she hasn't changed an iota, except she doesn't wear green stockings anymore. Yes. Okay, well anyway, so it's a long time actually. I suppose I'm giving things away.
You're talking about
1966 was when I first met Lily. And she actually was then teaching at King David. Anyway, the point I wanted to make was that I've been watching SWAP a long time, and it has actually evolved in many interesting ways. And what I have done in the last 10 years, after watching SWAP, I have gone around the world as an evangelist for public sociology, and SWAP has been my poster child. SWAP has been my poster child, and I want to just, in my 3 minutes, to say the 4 reasons why I think SWAP is so incredibly important as a vision of how sociology can be important, how the university can be important, and the importance of the exchange between social movements, and I would include the EFF too. It is a social movement, I believe, and also the political parties and the ways in which this conversation can take place across boundaries. So, the first is the idea of critical engagement, which Carl and Eddie are very in love with, and now after these 2 days, I'm in love with this idea too. It is the idea that people can be simultaneously engaged with the world and at the same time develop all new sorts of visions. One of the most significant features of SWAP is that it has systematically continued to engage with social movements, organizations, and at the same time has been able to develop a very distinctive sociology. So there is an interaction between the critical moment and the engagement moment. This, believe me, is extremely rare. That's the first point. The second point is related to that in South Africa, the membrane that separates university and society has always been very thin. And this is something that is happening all over the world. Increasingly, universities are subject to external pressures. Increasingly, universities are subject to pressures of corporatization, of privatization, of being put on hard budget constraints. And that gives advantage to whom? Economists, the business school. And the university is being pushed ever more into the hands of, let's use it, if Dunbar will let me, capital in its many manifestations. So, what is significant in this context of SWAP is that it has provided an alternative vision to that of business. It is something that is very rare in the world today. Latin America is perhaps an exception, or some places in Latin America. But in the north, indeed, the university is actually becoming ever more beholden to the forces of power and wealth. And so SWAP, as I tell people, is an instantiation of a resistance to this movement. That's my third point. Now, when I talk to people about public sociology in many places, that is sociology that is engaged with the world. They all think it's a great idea, and they think they can execute it by just jumping into the world and communicating their great ideas. And it's just not so simple. I tell them the importance of SWAP is its longevity. That we're talking, it's now our birthday, our 30th or 32nd birthday, I'm not sure which, but anyway, that this is something that's being built up over time. And what's been built up over time are relations between SWAP, between the institution SWAP, with all sorts of activists, social movements in the wider society. And this is not something done overnight. So that embeddedness in society is crucial. I think of SWAP as having, following one of my colleagues at Berkeley, embedded autonomy. Not in bed with autonomy, but embedded autonomy. That is, it simultaneously manages to survive with independence, but is embedded in society. So the longevity is very crucial. What I loved seeing in these last 2 days is the succession of generations. And to see how many people here have had 20, 30 years of relationships with SWAP, and to see the new generations of sociologists. There was a wonderful panel today of 2 ethnographers who really sort of represent the sort of cutting edge of ethnography. And so I think that SWAP, of course Carl and Eddie have been at the forefront of that, have been very crucial in generating new generations of social scientists and sociologists. That is my third point. The fourth point is that having an organization like SWAP is incredibly difficult to sustain over time. Eddie referred to the times when actually SWAP was under threat, and people who wanted to destroy SWAP. And Eddie, and now Carl, have actually held those forces at bay. But that is not easy. Being a public sociologist in any context is being in a world that is not usually receptive to the ideas of sociology, unlike those economists. And often, in many countries, this can endanger individuals. It can endanger people's lives. People have died in South Africa, in a sense, in actually pursuing public sociology, bringing sociological perspectives to the wider world. And I was even reminded as I was listening to the race discussion in the last panel, how Eddie actually in one of his interventions in the I'm not sure, late 60s, early 70s, 1974, when he, in response to the Black Consciousness movement, in response to the writings of Fanon, said publicly, and insisted publicly, that the whites of South Africa must reassess who they are, and was actually for those very clear statements about how whites must change themselves, how he got subsequently followed and punished and was on trial, and his life was in jeopardy. So,
Jeff Butler was my lawyer.
Oh yeah? Oh, I'm delighted to meet you. So, yes, so it is a precarious business. It is a precarious business. And I'm really delighted to see that the whole problem of keeping SWAP going, and this is my finale point, to keep SWAP going, you have to deal with not just new generations of sociologists, but you need a succession of leaders. And this is not easy. No, Eddie actually created this organization. You know, I think, if I may say so, I am a Manchester United supporter. Yeah. This is probably more controversial than anything we studied in the last 2 days. But one of the most interesting things, sociologically speaking, and I'm sure this makes many people here happy, is the departure of the manager, Mr. Ferguson. Now this was a real issue because he, like Eddie, had actually he'd actually been there for, I think it's 23 years. He built up that team, Manchester United, to be the best team in the world. Right? It was. This is a problem of succession. And you know there's going to be, as I've been telling all my friends, there's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 managers before we will recover our premier status in the world. Swap, on the other hand, if I may return to Swap. Swap, on the other hand, has had a wonderful succession. It is very rare, and I always said, I said there was one, I said, and Carl will endorse this. I always said that there's only one person, ultimately, when Sir Kayla departed, who could actually follow Eddie. And it was indeed Carl. The trouble was that Carl said, no, I'm going to write novels. Can you imagine that? I'm going to spend my life writing novels. Well, I don't know what happened, but I think probably you finished your novel. Or possibly he wanted to write a very special novel, the novel of Carl as head of Swap. That's going to be the great bestseller of the future. So I really want to thank you all for coming. Thank Swap for inviting me. Thank Swap for keeping in touch with me for so many years. And it is always a total delight to come here in South Africa and watch the unfolding of these incredible debates, the likes of which I don't see anywhere else in the world. And all, as I say, with a good sense of humor. So thank you all very much.
From English teams to German teams. Making a project such as Swap possible takes a lot of hard work, but it also takes funding. But for the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung or Friedrich Ebert Foundation, for Swap has been much more than a funder. It's also been an intellectual partner. I've witnessed conversations over the years between various directors of the FES, and it's been an institutional relationship between this foundation and the organization. If it wasn't for the FES, the Southern African labor movement would look very different. It's been a great supporter of workers in the subcontinent. So I would like to ask Renate Senbush from the FES to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great expectations now. And coming from Germany, we are not known for having this great sense of humor. We are known for being a little bit stiff. And yeah, we hear from you also that we don't like the word funders in the context. There's nothing like political foundations like we are, I think, anywhere else. I don't want to go into detail for that because it's not about FES today, it's about Swap today. I know Professor Eddie Webster quite well, Eddie, and I know now also Professor Karl von Holt quite well, so you know, it's getting formal now, be prepared. But I don't know the whole history of Swap. That is what I just learned again. Quickly talking to Eddie and our knowledge management in the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung is also not so quite well. That when you want to find out when did we start, what did we do at the beginning here in South Africa, we can't find all the time all the evidence. So I should have taken the time to call Eddie again. I didn't have the time, so there will be some mistakes. And I will read out to you a speech, and it's about a little bit, I will call it at the end, a little bit of love story between FES and Swap. And I hope I don't bore you, but I have to read that story, and I will do it in a very formal way. And yeah, I ask you to be patient and maybe listen to me up to the end. So, first of all, kindly, I was invited from Karl, Professor Karl von Hoy, to provide some reflections on SWOP and its research work on the occasion of its 30th anniversary that we are celebrating obviously here today. However, before taking you on a short journey through more than 20 years, and I learned from Eddie that is already a mistake, it is actually 30 years because we were partners from the beginning and SWOP was Eddie at that time and Eddie was SWOP. I was under the assumption it officially started when we moved as FAS and opened up an office in the 90s, the beginning of the 90s in Johannesburg. We were not allowed to open up an office before. But I learned from Eddie again, the relationship started from the beginning. And we did a lot of stuff already at that time, directed at that time from Germany without having an office here. Nevertheless, first I would like to congratulate SWOP, its founders, its leaders, its staff, and its supporters. And then I would like to start to tell a little bit of a common journey. FAS and SWOP first met in the middle of the 90s. That's wrong, they met in the 80s. Was it love at first sight? As far as I know, I would say yes. Was it a match made in heaven? After more than 20 years of good and productive cooperation, I would also say yes. The Society Work and Development Institute, I don't have to tell you, you know it, has over a period of 30 years established a national and international reputation in the study of work, labor and related socio-economic issues. SWOP scholars are exploring